for George, Mama's little baby. Quite appropriate for the introduction to Ian McFadyen on this on this Mother's Day night. Ian McFadyen, memories of Mother.
Memories of Mother. Well, interesting, the two words memory of mother. My mum, who's 97, has now is in a nursing home now, and I visited her today. We had a lunch at the nursing home with her, and she's unfortunately in one of those stages where most of her memories now have been lost. And so, and I'm sure a lot of people have gone through this situation where there's a point where you have to become your mother's memory. You have to become the person who tells her about her own life. And I know a lot of people are going through this at the moment, because we have a lot of aging people, and we've got a lot of people who are going into that whatever you want to call it, Alzheimer or dementia, where they're starting to lose big chunks of their life. They don't recall like 20-year periods of it or so.
Is that sad for you, or at this age do you just it's remarkable that your mother is still with you?
Well, it is. It is remarkable, and well, it's both. It's sad. It's sad because until she was well into her 90s, she was a pretty whiffet person, and then that decline, and it starts off with that absent-mindedness of asking you the same question over and over, which you've just said something, and you have to repeat the whole thing over and over, and then there comes the time when you realise that the memory's really quite gone. I think in my case, it's what you feel a bit of a twinge of sadness about is that if your parents lose their memory of your life and your childhood, then they're like the last witnesses, to your life.
Yes,
and then there's no one sort of to validate, and there's no one you can sort of check up anything against anymore. And then you're thrown back onto your own memory and think, well, I hope my own memory's good. I'm very glad, for example, that when my mother was in her 70s, that I sat down, for example, with a little tape recorder, and I got her to pretty much dictate her life story, so that I sort of had a record of it, because if I'd left it too long, that all would have been lost.
Well, tell us about your young days with Mum.
My young days with Mum, well, my mother's a very remarkable woman. I mean, you have to say that on, I think everyone says that on Mother's Day, but she was one of those people who had been, born during the First World War and grew up lost her father, who died when she was only 15, in the Depression. Very bright girl at Melbourne Girls High School, could have gone to university, but they were so poor. I mean, one of my mother's favourite little anecdotes I came across when I did her life story, when she used to go to school, they used to live in Essendon, and she used to walk down to Melbourne Girls High School, which was down in Spring Street in those days, in the city, and she used to walk there and back every day, but they were so poor that they only had one pair of shoes, and she used to walk to school she had the good, black school shoes. When she got home, her mum would put them on and go shopping.
Oh, isn't that marvellous?
And it was only, probably said her mother's feet were bigger than hers, so she stretched the shoes. But that's, this is, you see, we take things today like social welfare payments, widows paying, whatever, the pension, all these things for granted. But there was a time when if the breadwinner in the family died, there was nothing. You didn't have single mother's benefits.
And that would come so naturally to her. Take those shoes off, I'm going to go shopping, I'll put them on.
So they shared that. And then she couldn't go to university, even though she was given a place, and she became a teacher. And for the next 20 years or so, or 15 years, she was a country school teacher up in places, up in the Mallee, out in the desert, teaching those little tiny, those little two-room schoolhouses where they had the bubs in. They had grades 1 to 3 in one and 4 to 5, 6 in the other. And the kids would come to school on a horse, like 4 kids on one horse. And then, she's very much the story of that generation. Got married during the war to my father, who was in the bank. The first child, my brother, had cerebral palsy, which in those days there were very few support. There was almost no support system for that. So they were faced with looking after their first son being a spastic, and I came along very soon after that. And then we went through the sort of whole horror. My father eventually lost his job in the bank for various reasons. She became the breadwinner, so she went back to teaching, and so she was helping look after a disabled son. She was trying to put me through high school. She was earning the money. She decided then she would go to university. In her 40s, she went and did a university degree at night, and got up to do her Bachelor of Arts, and she eventually worked her way up to being a primary school principal of a school called Moorabbin Heights. And she was the founding principal of that. So she made this remarkable achievement in her life. And so she's a person who was a great role model, of extraordinary sort of energy and extraordinary kind of determination.
With all that academia behind her and a rapier like mine, how was she with cooking and birthday parties and Christmas?
She wasn't much at the home. I mean, she did wonders. Given we were very, very poor, I mean, she'd grade up poor, and the result of my father sort of losing his job, we were sort of poor, but she did wonders. She somehow created a very good home environment. She's pretty much not a great cook, you know. You know what it was. You know what night meals were like in those days.
Yeah.
It was a couple of chops and some mashed potatoes and peas.
That's right.
And that's what it went in the pan. She cooked and she did it. Also, she was no great. She tried a few things occasionally. My father, being on a sort of grumpy Australian bloke, would sort of poke and go, "What's this bloody stuff?" You know.
Yeah.
What's wrong with chops? You know, I'm not eating this stuff. So her expeditions into sort of adventurous cooking never worked very well.
What's this bolognese?
Yeah, what's this bloody stuff? You know, I'm cleaning it up a lot. You know?
Oh yes, I'll bet you are.
But yeah, I mean, it was interesting. Well, I mean, what I owe to her was that even though we were pretty broke, she filled the house with books.
Yes.
She subscribed to all the sort of Reader's Digest music albums, you know, the World Record Club,
classic,
the Time Life books on science, and so somehow because my brother was very hard. Bob was older than me. He was extremely disabled. He had to be dressed and fed and bathed and everything.
Dear.
So we never had holidays because you couldn't transport him.
No.
But she brought the world into the house as much as she could with music and books and art.
I think Ian McFadyen, she would have passed on to you the mantle of perhaps the artistic, the comedic, funny look at life, perhaps.
Well, I think so. I mean, my father, oddly enough, was the funny one. I mean, he was the one who had the sense of, if he had one virtue, he was a sociable storyteller. He was an absolute opposite to me. He was a good-looking, sporting, smoking, drinking, gambling man who was quite attractive and could really tell a good story.
All right, we'll leave it there, Ian McFadyen, in doing so. Thanking you so much for reminiscing about Mother on Mother's Day.
Thank you. I appreciate it, guys. And it is a very special day for me.
Thank you so much. Ian McFadyen from the Comedy Company, along with lots of other television productions. Ian McFadyen on